Hey, well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Smart Start, crafting your career story before you search. I'm Phillip Henry, PMP from Black Dog Management, which is a company of the Black Dog Group, and I'll be your moderator this morning. We're so glad to have you here with us for our first session in our LinkedIn Live series designed to help job seekers clarify their story, boost their confidence, and navigate the job market with intention. So today, we'll walk you through practical strategies to prepare you before you even hit the button apply, from understanding your emotions to refining your resume to crafting a strong elevator pitch to then understanding why your personal story matters in this competitive job market. So before we begin, we've just got a few housekeeping notes really quick. Today's session will last around 60 minutes or so. We'll hear from each of our speakers and then we'll open it up for audience Q&A. We're trying to allot for about 15 minutes or so for Q&A. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat at any time. We'll get to as many as we can, and I'll be moderating the chat throughout the session. So let's get started with someone who truly understands the emotional side of this journey. Whether you've just been laid off or you've been out there searching for a while, it's normal to feel overwhelmed and discouraged and even unsure where to begin. So let's please welcome Larry Kahn, Vice President of Recruiting at New Dimensions in Technology. He's a seasoned recruiter who's helped hundreds of job seekers reset and refocus after major career transitions. Larry?
Thank you, Philip. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So just a little bit about me, and then I'll segue into sort of the emotional part of a job search. I am the Vice President of Recruiting for New Dimensions in Technology. We're known as NDT. Our firm is a recruiting firm focused on high technology placement. We place engineering professionals, product managers, marketing professionals, sales and service delivery. So we tend to focus in the high tech space with a full life cycle. But what I want to start our discussion off with today is being laid off. And a lot of people are experiencing that right now. Know that you're not alone. So I have two key data points. A 2023 Forbes article notes that 40% of Americans have been laid off at least once in their careers. 23% lose their jobs 3 or more times over a lifetime. That's a very big difference than our parents and our grandparents' generation, where many people would take a job and stay for life. Second point is around the emotions of being laid off. And a lot of there's not a lot of discussion out there. It's sort of a quiet aspect that people have to deal with. But know that you're not alone. Typically when people get laid off, they have a range of emotions. What I tend to hear most often is it starts off with fear and loss of control. Someone has taken away your profession, your livelihood, and really your value, at least at the moment. So you go through a period of fear. What am I going to do? Who's going to help me? How do I get my next job? That fear might turn into anger and resentment. You're angry. You've worked hard. You put time in. You've done some good work for your company. And how dare they lay you off? And then sometimes it leads to possible depression. I've heard many cases where people have been laid off for a long period of time. And it's very easy to get depressed. So you yourself have to figure out ways to make a difference. And how do you get back on your feet? Well, the first thing is own your own story. Always be honest and concise. If you're speaking with peers, colleagues, potential employer, let them know that you were part of a layoff. You're not. It's very common these days, and don't feel negative about it. It happens. activate your emotional support system, whether it be your partner, your children, your extended family, friends, and your colleagues from work. Together you can all get through this, and don't be shy of asking for help. You need it, and at another time you'll give it back to someone else who might need it. Have a daily plan of action. Before you end your day, think about what you want to do the next day. Try not to get up in the morning with no plan. You're much better off having a plan, and then you'll follow that plan through that day, and you'll feel better about yourself. And focus on your professional value. You've done good things. You have good work experience. Be proud of that, and make sure that when you're talking about your professional accomplishments, that you're concise. You talk about maybe 2 or 3 key things in your background that are more recent that you're most proud of professionally. If you're talking with people about what you want to do, don't be general. Say, I'm looking for a product marketing role that might have a focus on healthcare, or I'm looking for something in product management that might have an AI component. The more specific that you can be, the better chance that you're going to find something meaningful for your next job. So, Philip, at that, I'll give it back to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Larry. Appreciate that. Now, let's turn it over to Risa Kahn. She is the senior recruiting manager at New Dimensions in Technology, and she's also the founder of RK Resume Consulting. Risa is a resume expert who will share how to make your resume a marketing tool that truly represents who you are and what you bring, and not just being a list of jobs. So, Risa, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So I'm excited to be here today. I have, as Phil mentioned, I'm a senior recruiting manager for New Dimensions in Technology. I have been a talent recruiter for over 25 years, both in tech and non-tech. And I'm the founder of RK Resume Consulting. We are a consulting company that works with people through their entire job search process. So beginning with the intentional strategy for your next step, once we have a target in mind, working on a resume that will be the best possible marketing tool for you in today's market. Also working with people on mock interviews if they find that they are getting the interview but are not getting the job offers. So today our focus is on optimizing your resume. In today's highly competitive job market, job seekers need to optimize their resumes for reader response. Most resumes get an initial scan of only 6 to 8 seconds by the reader. This short review window highlights the importance of making a very strong and immediate impression with a resume, given that most employers decide whether to continue reading within seconds. So today I would like to share with you a sampling of techniques for optimizing your resume for reader response. And this is just a sampling to cover in today's session. What your resume should not be. Your resume should not be a chronological or just a chronological record of your work history. That's where most of us begin. We keep track of our work experience, our specific skill set, and have it in a chronological form as a record that we keep for ourselves. But when it comes to actually applying for a position, each resume version should intentionally be the best possible marketing tool of you, not just a record of your work history. So this is true for both tech and non-tech industries. What you want to include in your resume are highlights of your experience, specific quantitative accomplishments, and the tools relevant for the job that you are specifically targeting. Then what you need to keep in mind in this market, and for those of you who haven't looked for a job in a while, don't feel that you're any different than anyone else that maybe had looked a few years back, because things have changed significantly. One, we have to work with the market as it is. The market is highly competitive. Employers are extremely risk averse and looking for very specialized skills. So that being said, employers have put applicant tracking software in place to help them with the overwhelming amount of resumes that they're receiving. And there's not an exact science as to how to apply for jobs, but there are ways and tricks and techniques to help optimize the possibility that you will get through the applicant tracking software. And again, please know that each company is using a different software, has different criteria in place, and will openly admit that it's not the most optimal system, but it's what they have for now to help narrow down the number of candidates that they have to consider. So what you want to be thinking about with your resume is that it be easily digestible by the software as well as by the reader, who could be an internal recruiter or maybe a HR manager or a hiring manager. So I know there are a number of templates out there for resumes. A number of people over the years have turned to formats that are more aesthetically pleasing, may have design, may have photos, may have information down the columns. My recommendation, especially in this market, is that you go back to the traditional form of chronological resume, which reads left to right. That's the best way for the applicant tracking software to pick up the content. And as humans, that's the way we interpret information, from left to right, rather than having information blocks in different parts of the resume. Once the applicant tracking system narrows down the resumes to a smaller pile, what I am hearing that some HR professionals in this market are also using AI tools to narrow down that smaller pile of resumes to an even smaller one. So again, you need to have the key information on that resume that the software is looking for and the hiring content is looking for. So ideally, what you will do is create information on the resume that's going to immediately attract the attention of the reader. So for example, if you're applying for a role that's a program management role, ideally you will state that at the top of your resume, and throughout your resume, highlight where you have had program management responsibilities. Even if you haven't had that title, there are ways to have the focus of the resume be on what you've done as a program manager rather than, for example, a product manager, which is your current title. The resume should highlight the most relevant responsibilities for the job you're targeting rather than all of the responsibilities of your current role. Next, I like to talk about the introduction on your resume. The introduction should consist of 3 to 5 clear and concise lines. And that takes a bit of work. I typically work on the introduction after I've had a session of working with someone who's revising their resume, for example. What I recommend is that you inject some personality. This is one of the only places on your resume where you can provide that. So for example, the introduction of a resume may start off with intellectually nimble product leader, and then weave throughout some interesting adjectives that are unique to you. Or if you were to think, if you don't like to, for example, brag about yourself, think about how somebody else would describe you, and that makes it a lot easier. So the introduction should talk about who you are and what you're looking to do next. It should not be a list of the multiple jobs that you may consider. So for example, and you've probably seen this or you've done it yourself, there are resumes that may read program manager, project manager, product manager in the introduction. I can tell you from experience, since we as a recruiting company receive many resumes, and we get feedback also from hiring contacts that those are the resumes that are typically skipped over. Your resume should be laser focused on who you are. For example, you are a product manager, or you're a program manager now seeking your next role to transition into a program manager. And then throughout your resume, you're going to show why you are looking for a program management role. Next, what I like to recommend is that your skills, professional skills, software skills, and tech tools be at the top of your resume. Many people put that on the second or third page at the bottom of the resume. And again, in that 6 to 8 second review, that may never be viewed. So you want to actually spoon feed to the reader who you are, what you're looking to do, the skill sets, and the tools, software tools, and skills at the very top of your resume. Next, after the skills, should be your work experience. And here, what people tend to do is list as many highlights as they can that give a good sense of their quantitative results and job responsibilities. And oftentimes I see 6 to 12 bullets underneath each job. Given the reader and the attention span and the time to quickly read over resumes, it's highly unlikely that 6 to 12 bullets will even be looked at. My recommendation is to create subheadings. If a job that you're targeting talks about your strategic expertise, as well as your hands-on responsibilities, and as well as your responsibilities as a manager, you may want to create subheadings that highlight strategic driver, hands-on implementer, and team manager. So my intent today was to provide a sampling, and this is just a sampling of some of the techniques to maximize response to your resume. And once you've sharpened your resume, it's time to focus on something even more personal, your story.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Risa. So, excuse me, as Risa just mentioned, a great resume gets you in the door, but your career story is what builds a connection. Liana Henry, principal of Black Dog Marcom, a company of the Black Dog Group, is a storytelling expert and marketing strategist who helps job seekers craft career narratives that feel personal and powerful and purposeful. Liana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Welcome. My part of the session today is going to be talking about storytelling and aligning your story to your goals. So let me get started here. Sorry. Okay. So I just want to talk about why your story matters. I also want to talk about how do you craft that career story. It's really a bridge from where you are to where you want to go. I also want to talk about how the best stories are really going to demonstrate to the hiring manager why you're the best fit, and then just give you an example of how to align your story. So I am a professional storyteller. I've been telling stories for 20 years in corporate marketing, communications, journalism, and public relations. I have a master's degree in journalism, marketing, communications, and PR, and I'm also an adult ed and autobiography storytelling instructor. I am the CEO of Black Dog Group and the principal of Black Dog Marcom, and I host a storytelling podcast. So I love storytelling, and I love to be able to share that with others. So why does your story matter when you are in the process of a job search? Your story is how you will communicate your experience and how you will align your experience to what the hiring manager is looking for. Just like Risa said, it isn't just your resume is not just a summary of your jobs. Your story isn't just a summary of your jobs. It is the emotional context behind what were the choices that you made when you were looking for work and you were moving through your career. It's where you demonstrate how you grew in all of the different roles that you held. And it's also the place where you get to really show what your impact was, where you worked for the different companies that you worked for. In a crowded job market, your story isn't just going to be an example or just a list of facts. When I say example, It's not a story. A story has an arc, and examples are just usually a list of information. So you telling a compelling story is really going to make you stand out to a hiring manager. And when you're meeting with a hiring manager and you're sharing your story, that's where they're going to understand your motivation for applying for this role. They're going to get a better sense of how your values and their values align, and it's a great way for them to remember you. If a interviewer or a hiring manager has met with 20 different candidates, what's going to make you stand out? Your story. And it really will answer the question, why should they choose you? So where you've been and where you're headed, your story is that bridge. And your career story is a journey. Where did your career start? Why did it start there? What were the crossroads? Where were the moments where you maybe grew in a certain area or you didn't? And what were your lessons that you learned along the way? When you have a career story that maybe has some twists and turns, you can still align it to the job that you're seeking. So when you're looking to connect the dots, where were the places where you can, in your story, how can you share about the moments where you had curiosity? Um, how can you share in the moments where you were adaptable? Where did you take on leadership roles? How did you demonstrate that in the different roles? Your story is the place where you're going to get to do that. And even if you're moving from, like a certain role right now that you're going to change roles, your story can still demonstrate that your skills are transferable and that you really are equipped to be in this new role. So telling the best stories, which you should always have in your back pocket, and they should be easy to tell and should roll off your tongue, really are going to demonstrate how you're the best fit out of all the other candidates. So it's not about what you've done, it's why it matters to the role. So, when you figure out where you want to go, it's taking, it's looking at the list of maybe jobs that you had. It's finding those themes and examples, and it's lining them up to what the hiring manager is looking for. Where's the similar mindset? Did you have any results that they're going to care about that are going to demonstrate that you're going to be a good fit? When you're telling your story, be concise and be very specific. It's common for folks to want to share it all, but you're not going to have a lot of time and you really want to hit the mark. So, keeping it specific and concise is the way to go. And be intentional, be authentic, be real. Um, so, how do you align your story? So, the first thing is right now, sort of in this early stage, is to reflect. Where were those moments? And some of the challenge stories are some of the best stories because if you overcame a challenge, that is always a win. Uh, what are the things that you're most proud of? The impacts that you've made. And then, is there some place where your passion just keeps coming up, where it's really clear that you're very passionate about, a certain part of your job? Then you want to connect. You want to connect the what the hiring manager is looking for to what your experience is. So where does your journey align? And again, keeping it concise, keeping it specific. Then choosing one to two or even three stories that you can tell. Again, keeping them specific. Remember to talk about the results and have a clear call to action, like letting them know, like, hey, this is why you're going to want to choose me. So here's an example. I'm a marketer, so I'm going to use a marketing example. So here's a job responsibility that was in a job posting. Um, and it said, lead the creation of newsletters, ensuring timely and relevant product updates to be shared with prospects and clients while working closely with product management on various product release initiatives. I chose this because I've done this. So the career story could be when they're sitting across from the interviewer, they can explain how they were tasked with writing product updates in a newsletter. They were working for a SaaS company. The engineering team had launched a feature they were thrilled about, but in the release notes, it was just a lot of technical jargon. So the marketer had the challenge and the opportunity to translate it with enthusiasm into something that a customer would care about. If you can talk about sort of the day to day pain points and how this feature would solve those problems, then you're going to have the attention of the person reading the newsletter. And so in the career story, this candidate is saying how the newsletter had some of the highest open and click through rates that they'd seen in 6 months. I had been tasked with um, uh, taking a newsletter that had been global in a software company that people weren't reading, and to make it into something that was a usable information tool. And in a year, we were able to increase the readership about 33%. So if I was before an interviewer, this would be the story that I would tell. So that's my spiel. I just want to say thank you. Um, this is just the first session. We do have another session next week at 1:30 where I will continue to talk about story and how to put your story into action through all your touch points. There is a QR code on the screen. You can scan that with your camera, and it will take you to a drive where we have all of the slides that you're seeing today. And with that, I will send it back to you, Philip.
All right. Thank you very much, Liana. So, and now finally, let's bring in Andy Winig. He is the elevator pitch coach from Improv Andy and a specialist in personal branding. Andy is a networking expert who will talk to you about how to turn your story into a conversation starter so you can open doors without, like all of us, feeling awkward or overly rehearsed. Andy, it's all up to you.
Thanks a lot, Philip, and thanks everyone. Thanks everyone for being here, and thanks to all my panelists. It's really exciting to be here today with everyone. I want to talk today for a couple of minutes about how to talk to strangers, because we know that when we're looking for a job, we're going to need to talk to strangers. And this is the thing that people really get nervous about. And so what we're going to be doing, I got to say that what we're going to be doing today, this is the agenda. We're going to be talking about some easy icebreakers, so some easy ways to start conversations that get you to the people who might be looking to hire. And then we're going to talk a little bit about where referrals come from, because it could be, it could be that you'll put your resume and you'll click submit and get your resume and it'll get noticed. But there's also the opportunity, of course, to know people and to send your resume into someone who's expecting the resume because someone made a warm introduction. And so we're going to start today. Again, we have this going on for a couple of Wednesdays. We're going to start today with how we start that process, how we start looking for the people who are going to be able to give those referrals to us. Now, as I look back on my career, my belief is that every single opportunity I've had came from a conversation. I look back to everything I did, every job I had, every client I brought on. It's always come from a conversation. And so the trick is to get better at starting conversations. And this was so mysterious to me. It was such a difficult challenge for me that I actually wrote a book on it, the Elevator Pitch Handbook. And for today, what I want to focus on is this idea that when you're thinking about your elevator pitch, when you're thinking about talking to someone about what you want to do, the only goal of the pitch is to start a conversation. That's all we're trying to do. We're just trying to start a conversation. And people run up to me all the time and say, "And I gave my pitch and nobody offered me a job." And that's right, because giving the pitch gets people interested, and then you have to send your resume, and then you have to have interviews, and then there's process that goes on to get to the job. But the elevator pitch is really that beginning point where you get people interested in what you are and how you can help them. And so that's what I want to talk about today. When people think about the elevator pitch, they think a lot about the 30-second pitch. Today, we're going to be talking more about what I call the conversational pitch, which is how you get people interested in who you are and what you're doing, and continue the conversation so that then they can send you to somebody who's hiring, or they can have an idea for people you can talk to. It's a way of kind of creating this network that will help you. So let's talk about the biggest opportunity, the biggest missed opportunity in all of job seeking. And it's when someone walks up to you, right? This is something that happens to all of us every day, and we just walk right on past it. What does it look like? Someone walks up to you, looks you in the eye, says, "Hey, how's it going?" How do most people respond? "Oh, fine. Same old, just trying to get by." This is the biggest missed opportunity in all job seeking. It's the biggest missed opportunity. What I'm going to suggest from now on is when someone asks you, "How's it going?" you respond in the form of, "Awesome. And something awesome that you just did." Now, I'll say for a minute that when I work with job seekers, the first response to this is, "Andy, nothing's going well. I don't have a job. Were you listening to me? I mean, come on, I need a job." And what I'll say is that when you're out in the world and when you're starting conversations with people, there are good things that are happening, right? I mean, maybe you just found a new job opportunity. Maybe you just updated your resume. Maybe you just met a great recruiter, right? Maybe you just got a great idea for updating your resume. There are all sorts of good things that are going on that will gently tell people that you're looking for a job, right? Instead of, oh, I'm looking for a job, you can say, oh, I just found this really interesting job that I might be good for. And that'll start the conversation a lot more naturally. So let's take a look at a couple of these. Like, awesome, I just did something awesome. How's it going, Andy? Awesome. I just learned some great tips for updating my resume from Risa, And people look at this partly and say, Andy, really? I mean, awesome. Did you grow up in the 80s or something? And yes, I am a child of the 80s, and awesome works for me. And it may not work for you, and that's fine. You can do wonderful, incredible, fantastic, fair to middling. Any positive, upbeat superlative works equally well in this kind of situation. Let's look at another example. Andy, how's it going? Fantastic. I just hit the game-winning shot for my basketball team. And, people say this and they say, Andy, I mean, come on, like I need a job. Like, why am I talking about basketball? Like, what's the point of that? But I'll remind you that the goal is to start a conversation. We're looking to start a conversation. And if the person in front of you also plays basketball or plays softball or just got back from Disney World or also secretly likes planting hydrangeas, now you have something to talk about that's a little bit more authentic, right? Now you have something to talk about that gets into a little bit more of who you are and what you're about. And if you have that connection, that's how you can start building trust, right? You don't build trust in 30 seconds. You don't even build trust in 30 minutes, right? You build trust over time. And so you're looking to be able to talk to people over time. And that can be helpful if you have some similar interests. We'll share one more quick example. Is Andy, how's it going? Amazing. I just put an application in a great sounding company. And this is what I call the crossover pitch, because this, you don't want to spend all day doing small talk. You don't want to spend all day talking about the great hobbies that you're playing, because what you really are doing is looking for a job. And this is why this is the crossover pitch. Just put in an application in a great sounding company. And look at how much information this gives people about you without you having to say anything, right? They'll say, oh, what company? Or you're looking for a job, or I didn't realize you were, and now all of a sudden you're in a conversation about things that can be really helpful for where you are and what you're looking for. So again, what I like to do here is when people say, how's it going, is answer in the form of awesome. I just did something awesome. And so those of you on the call, if you want to go ahead and put something in the chat, like what's something awesome that's been going on for you? I just did something that's a really nice thing to put in the chat box to get a sense of who we are and how we can connect and ways that we're similar. So that's the icebreaker. So again, go ahead and put that in the chat. And so that's what we talked about, the icebreaker. Next, what I want to talk about is where referrals really come from. And they do not come from where your parents told you they came from. That is most certainly true. And when I think about the pitch, and especially when I think about the short pitch, there are a couple of opportunities in the short pitch that a lot of people are not taking full advantage of. How's it going? Or what do you do? Well, I'm looking for a job. And the reason this doesn't work, there are a lot of reasons it doesn't work, but from the pitch point of view, the reason this doesn't work is it doesn't pass one of the two tests that I apply to any elevator pitch. And this test is what I call the pillow talk test. And for the pillow talk test, you think about the hiring manager. You think about somebody who's actually trying to hire for the job that you're looking for. And you think about them waking up in the morning next to their partner or their spouse or whoever it is they hang out with. And they turn to their partner or spouse and say, you know what, honey, today's the day. Today's the day I'm going to hire someone who's looking for a job. I mean, that's true, but that's not what they're waking up thinking about, right? That's not how they're thinking about it. And so what are they thinking about? Well, for this particular client, I want to work in finance for a nonprofit. And she was interesting because she came to me, had no idea. She was all over the place. I could do this, I could do that. And over the course of working with her, we got her down to I want to work in finance for a nonprofit. And I'm not kidding. 3 days later, she was at a networking event. And she said this, I want to work in finance for a nonprofit. And there was a nonprofit in the room that raised their hand and said, we're looking for a finance person. And the challenge people have is this feels so narrow. Well, I'll take any job, but it doesn't matter what the job is. It's counterintuitive. I assure you that when you're this specific, that's when the opportunities come up and that's when the conversations start going, that you're looking for. That's how people respond. People respond when you're being specific. So let's look at a couple more examples of this. I'm a supply chain professional, right? Like it's hard to, so the issue with this is the second test that I apply to elevator pitches. It's not oddly specific, right? Supply chain can mean so many different things, so many different people. There's so many supply chain people out there. How are you setting yourself apart? And a straightforward way to set yourself apart is, I am a VP of supply chain for makers of car transmissions. And again, car transmissions, that seems so narrow, but if it's car transmissions, people will think about you if they're doing screws or nails or like any sort of thing. Like they can put themselves into, they can map themselves onto that. So supply chain for makers of car transmissions, it's a little bit oddly specific. Oh, so what did you do with why car transmissions? Is that international, right? Now you can get into all sorts of conversations about this. I want to give one more example, and then I'll be done. So again, I work in HR, right? Well, there are a lot of different jobs in HR, right? There's a lot of different ways of doing a lot of different companies that use HR. And so for this, I'm an HR admin for pharmaceutical companies. And again, it's not that you wouldn't take a job at a different kind of company, right? I encourage you, whatever job someone offers you, if it's a good fit for you, go ahead and take it, right? It's not that, but when we're marketing ourselves, when we're getting ourselves out there and looking for opportunities, being this specific is really helpful. And so, again, I want to thank everyone for being here today. I really enjoyed working with you. If you want to talk more about this short pitch, that is I offer a 30-minute free consultation on your pitch. And so you can use that QR code and set up time with me. And I'd be happy to talk to you and get you speaking in a way that gets people interested in helping you and introducing you to the people that you want to be introduced to. And once you've got that, like once you've got this going, that's when a recruiter can really help. Like when you start being clear about what you're looking for, that's a really great opportunity. Talk to a recruiter. So Philip, at this point, I will send it back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Andy. And so for now, let's bring this around full circle and let's welcome Larry back to the microphone one more time. And this time, Larry is going to talk about why reaching out to a recruiter early, yes, early, even if you're not sure what you want to do next, can be a smart and strategic move. Larry, it's all yours.
Thank you, Philip. So these days, there are many ways to look for a job. Utilizing your network, looking at job postings, a lot of what Andy has talked about today in terms of discussions at different events. Working with a recruiter is another avenue and a very important avenue. So what does a recruiter actually do? What do I do every day? So every day I'm speaking with our client companies about their hiring needs and certain types of candidates that they're looking for. And some of those positions are very specific and they're very direct, where I have a job description and the company has asked NDT to go and fill that job description. Other times the jobs are hidden, where I'll speak to a senior executive at a company and they'll say, if you come across an XYZ type of candidate who has this type of background, I want to see them. And my question is, do you have a job? Well, if you find us that type of candidate, Larry, we'll open the job. So I'll call those hidden job opportunities. And over my 30 years of being in the recruiting business, I've placed a lot of really good candidates with great companies where the job has not been advertised. Secondly, we have access to hiring decision makers. So I hear all the time, it's how do I get past an applicant tracking system, an ATS? Are there magical rules? And Risa talked a little bit about that, and there are different philosophies around it, but it's a very tough thing to do. When you see a job posted on LinkedIn and the job goes live, and within a few hours you see 100 people have applied. Well, that's it's just a herd effect. A lot of people are just sending their resumes in to companies and they're not even qualified for the job. So here at NDT, we have access to those hiring managers, and other good recruiting firms will have the same types of relationships. Knowledge of companies and cultures, and that's very important. You want to look for a job, but you really want to make sure that you're fitting in with the type of company and culture that works best for you. And at different times in your life, you'll look for different companies. Maybe in your early days, in your 20s and 30s, you would consider a startup company where there's high risk, high reward. Maybe as your responsibilities change in your later 30s, 40s, and beyond, you want something that is a little bit more secure. And what is it like at that company? Do they head out for beers after work, and are you expected to play pool after work? You want to be in a place where you fit well, and where it's the right time for you. Um, we also, as recruiters, have history of placing candidates at our client companies, so we can give you a lot of inside scoop of what is it really like to work at that company, and what is it like to get a promotion, and who are the hiring managers who you really want to work for, and maybe some hiring managers that just don't fit your type of personality. And that's very important. You want to get up every morning and like what you do. We also help with interview prep, and that's super important. We have a lot of insight into what our hiring managers are looking for and what's going to be important to them. So it's no different than taking a Princeton review class before your SAT. We don't have all the answers for you, but we can at least give you some structure of how to prepare for those interviews. And then at the end, it's salary negotiation. And that can be very tricky when you do it on your own. So we're in the middle. We can add a lot of value when it comes to salary negotiation so that it feels right. So it's a win-win for both you, for our client companies, and then it's moving forward. And also, there are certain delicate issues that might arise where, maybe the company wants you to work 4 days a week in the office, and you have a young family at home. You can only work 2 days. Well, who's going to manage that discussion? It's the recruiter. We do that all the time. And then it's ultimately closing the deal. It's bringing the company together with the candidate and making it work. And there's a lot of finesse that goes into that. And working with an experienced recruiter helps close that deal. So I hope that's helpful for those of you who have worked with an experienced recruiter. Continue to build that relationship. Keep in touch with them. I always like when my candidates just reach out and say, Larry, nice, how are you doing? I don't need a job right now, but nice to connect with you. And that's really, it's a relationship driven business. So my QR code is below. If you want to have that and be in touch with me, I'd love to hear from you. And with that, I will give it back to Philip to open up questions.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Larry. And thank you to all of our speakers today. I think, in my humble opinion, this was a great way to kick off the series. So now let's move into the Q&A portion. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and drop your questions into the chat. And while we wait for a few to come in, here's a couple we hear all of the time. This first one's going to go out to Andy. Andy, how can I tell if my message is clear or if I'm just confusing people when I talk about what I want?
Well, that's a great question, Philip. Thanks for passing that along. So a lot of people know this. I do a lot of work with folks now that what you want is for people to give you a referral, right? When you're talking about things, someone's like, oh, I know somebody's working in that industry, or I know a manager who does that sort of thing, or my brother-in-law is actually, this kind of person. And so if people are telling you stories or giving you introductions, that's a really good sign that you're being clear. And if that's not happening, that's a really good sign that you could work on your pitch. And again, I work in finance for nonprofits. Like, that was specific enough that it actually got her introductions and opportunities. So again, the way is whether people are actually giving you opportunities.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Andy. All right. Our next question that's coming in is going to go to Liana. Liana, we've got one in here. What are the biggest mistakes job seekers make when trying to align their personal story with their career goals? Can you help us with that?
Sure. So, one of the common mistakes that people make when it comes to storytelling is that um, they might try to spend a lot of time in the past trying to connect to the role that they want next. Um, you know, it's better to be concise, and it's better to be really specific and not try to, tell too many different stories. Really, really keeping it targeted. But also, trying again, don't be vague. Keep it specific. And it's important not to overshare irrelevant details. Again, it just goes back to just making sure that you're really making that connection to what the hiring manager is looking for and aligning your experience to that. And again, just intentional, authentic. That's really, really important.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Liana. And Liana, just to give you a heads up, we've got some feedback in from Paul Bradley, trying to register with the link that was put in the comments, and it doesn't seem to be working. So can you take a look at what we've got for the route, and then send me a message or help us out there? Wonderful. Thank you. All right. So next up is one for Risa. Actually, the next one we got one for Risa and one for Larry, which is appropriate. So Risa, if I've already developed multiple versions of my resume for multiple job categories, how would you further optimize my resume for increased response?
Thank you. I think this is a great question. So, and I've had this exact scenario come up with clients I've worked with. So, one of my first questions is, if you've already begun a job search, what type of response are you getting from your current resume? And typically the answer is it's a very low response in this market. And I'll talk about one specific client. So he, very skilled, in his area of expertise, did a wonderful job creating 3 different versions of his resume. One was a program management, one was a technical leader, and one was a project manager resume. So in his mind, he was all set. He had worked very hard to create 3 different versions of his resume, and he did do a very good job, except he wasn't getting much result back. So one picture I like to put in your mind, just to give you a sense of the way that a lot of us think. When you think of a 2-year-old, for example, that keeps walking into a wall and hitting their head in the same place in the wall, if somebody would just take the time to redirect and point them in another direction, they may see the world from a whole other view. And we all do that. So that's the beauty of working with someone with a specific expertise, whether it be a recruiter or a elevator pitch coach or a storyteller or a resume consultant, is that we can pick you up out of the place that you're stuck in and point you in a direction where you can learn techniques for customizing, for example, your resume to get a better result.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Risa. And this next one is going to go out to Larry. Larry, what types of opportunities does your company typically work on that, frankly, I may not see elsewhere? Can you help?
Sure. It's sort of a range. So, engineering roles. We have some companies right now that are sort of doing more with AI, but they're not sort of getting it out there. They're not publicizing it as widely. So they've come to us and asked for certain types of machine learning background candidates and candidates who might have worked, had some experience with AI products, even if it's doing some more learning around that. We tend to get product management roles and marketing roles that are quiet hires, where a company might have someone in a role where they're not exactly thrilled with. Maybe the person is a good employee, but they're just not right for that role. So we've got to help that company quietly look for other candidates who might go into that position. Companies will come to us looking for sales people for a new product that they're coming out with, but they haven't announced the product yet. So they want to hire in advance. And they'll come to us quietly saying, I need candidates who have the following types of skill set, who have sold this type of product before, but we don't want to advertise the job. We're not ready to do our launch yet. So we want to hire in advance. So that gives you just sort of a range, but anything to do with the full life cycle of a technology company, from building a product to getting it out to the market, sales, and then service delivery. And in all of those categories, we'll have hidden jobs come to us, to help our client companies fill those.
Wonderful. Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Larry. All right, we've got a couple more here. Andy, this one's for you, and it's kind of good, and it kind of can really touch on a lot of the things that some of our folks here might be looking at or needing help with. Andy, what's the best way to make a strong first impression when I'm feeling uncertain or discouraged?
Yeah, so that's something we see a lot, right? That it's hard, whether you're looking for a job or looking for new clients or any of those things. It's hard to have, it's imposter syndrome. Like, how am I am I worthy to go out and do this? And the thing I'll say about this is you really want to be specific, right? Like, that's really the way to help. And I work with people all the time who are like, oh, I don't like to toot my own horn. I don't like to promote myself. Like, I'd really, and if you'll notice the techniques a lot of us have been talking about today, you're not really promoting yourself. You're promoting what you solve. You're promoting the kind of problems you solve. You're promoting what you could do for a company. Like, the story you're telling about the stuff that you did previously, or the specific kind of job you're looking for, or working through a recruiter so that they can help you with the specifics of that. So it's really, and part of it's going out, right? Part of it's having a question in your back pocket that you can just pull out. And I'll say to folks that if you're going to networking events, or if you're talking to people, like, a really great opening line for someone is, hey, do you come to a lot of these kinds of events? So once again, it's, hey, do you come to a lot of these kinds of events? It's a really nice opening line that's easy to answer, starts the conversation. And I always say to people, like, as nervous as you are about starting the conversation, the person you're approaching is probably even more nervous. And so again, part of it is confidence about working through what you're looking for and your skills. And the other part is, getting practice with it. Thanks a lot, Philip.
Wonderful. Thank you, Andy. And we've got time for probably a couple more. We've got one out going to Liana. Liana, oh, hang on. There it is. What does storytelling matter in a job search, and how can it help someone stand out in this competitive landscape?
Thanks, Philip. I mean, the whole point of storytelling is to be memorable, especially in a job search, right? And so that's where that authenticity and that intentionality really is important. When you're sitting across from an interviewer, they're not just interested in they are interested in your qualifications, but they're not just interested in your qualifications. They also want to know, are you a fit to the team? Are you aligned to the mission? And so, storytelling is how you can bridge that gap with that information. And, your resume is going to definitely, list your accomplishments, but, a great story really does connect the dots.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you, Liana. And our last question is going to be a combo question for both Risa and Larry. And that is, when should I start working with a recruiter job search advisor?
Okay, I can start off with that. Ideally, it should be an ongoing relationship, something that I had mentioned in my conversation a few minutes ago. It's always great when you've gotten to know someone, a good recruiter, when you don't need them, and continuing to keep that dialogue going, helping you with career decisions. I always tell people, touch base with me every 6 to 12 months, even though you might not be looking for a job. I can advise you on, the work that you're doing and how marketable it is to the outside world, outside of your current company, when you're ready to look for a job. But if you're not in that situation, you were just in that situation where you've been laid off, as I started the conversation today, then reach out to recruiters and look for recruiters who work on the jobs that you would tend to want. So study their website, look at the jobs, maybe look at the history of some of their jobs. So even on our site, we have our active jobs and then we have jobs that we filled. I'll always say, look at some of the jobs we filled, and that gives you a good sense of the work that we've done in the past, even though the most our current jobs might not have what you're looking for today. And then the best way is to email me with a concise cover email and a resume. And a cover email is just a few bullets about what you're about and what you're looking for, and then I want to see your resume. And I don't mind if your resume is not in the best form. I just want to get a sense of who you are. And if your resume needs work, Risa is a wonderful resource. If you need to have a broader story, then I would refer you to Liana. And then in terms of interviewing style, Andy. But I have access to a lot of professionals who might help if you need to have specific needs. So I'll hand the rest on to Risa.
Risa, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. So as a job search consultant, my recommendation is when people typically find it most valuable to work with me is when we want to strategically put a plan in place for a search. So before you can start a search, you need to know what you're looking for before you can reach out to, before you create a resume or revise your resume. Again, you need to have a target of what you're looking for. So when I start the process in working with people as a job search consultant, we put together an intentional strategic plan, and it may be to steer their career in a different direction, for example, into the technology world, or decide to leave tech for whatever reason because you're at a different stage in your career. Maybe you want to go to work for MIT and work in academia. So we start there, and then I work with a number of people on a weekly basis to put their plan in place for the start of each week, and then to carry that plan through with a resume and be prepared with when they speak to people in their network or people new to their network to share what it is that they are looking for next.
Wonderful. That's a great answer from you both. Thank you, Risa and Larry. And with that, we're pushing up against the hour, so that's all the time we have for this morning. But before you go, just a reminder that we have our next session in this LinkedIn Live series next Wednesday. It's not in the morning, but in the afternoon from 1:30 to 2:30, and I believe we got the link corrected. And this one's entitled Standout, Telling Your Story to Land the Job. So this session will dive into, naturally, how to execute your job search, aligning your resume and interviews and elevator pitch to tell a consistent, compelling story. So you can go ahead and RSVP today, sign up. We'll be here next Wednesday. And everyone, have a great rest of your Wednesday afternoon. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.